morning students. Today I am going to show you a Java program that will calculate the simple interest for a certain sum of money. So the sum of money, which is the principal, will be given and you will be asked to find the simple interest for that sum of money or the principal after a given time period and at a specific rate of interest. So say if the certain sum of money, if it is 1000 rupees, that is, if the principal is 1000 rupees, we supply the value of 1000 to this variable called principal, multiplied by the star symbol represents multiplication. Remember that. Rate of interest. Now say if the rate of interest is 5%, you put 5 for this variable rate of interest multiplied by time. And if the given time period is say for 2 years, put the value of 2 for this variable time, and this becomes 1000 into 5 into 2, that is the value of principal is 1000 into the value of rate of interest is 5 into the value of time is 2 years. So the product of this expression will be calculated and then divide by 100, and the final value will then be stored in this SI, which represents the simple interest. Now let's understand the workflow of this interface design. So this principal, this is the first label. Now let's name this label with the text principal as J label 1, and also the text field corresponding to this label, let's name it as J text field 1. Similarly, for the label with the text rate of interest, let's name this label as J label 2, and the text field corresponding to that let it be J text field 2. Then come here, see the time in years, let's name this label as J label 3, and the text field corresponding to that label, let's name it as J text field 3. Then come to the simple interest, which will be calculated based on the value of this principal, rate of interest and time using this formula. Now simple interest, this is the fourth label, so let's name this label called simple interest as J label 4, and the text field associated with that, let's name it as J text field 4. Now this simple interest will be calculated based on the value of principal, rate of interest and time, and it will be calculated only on clicking this calculate button. So on the click of a mouse button, say an event, that is the click of a mouse button, this button, that is calculate button, will get activated and the simple interest will be calculated using this formula, and the result will be shown here. So this is how this interface works. In the next slide I will show you the Java code to demonstrate the working of this interface. Now for simplicity I have shown this interface in this slide at the top. Now let's try to understand this Java code as I teach you line by line. Now come to the first line of this Java code. The first line declares 4 different variables: principal, rate of interest, time and SI, and all these have been declared of float data type. This is because principal is a certain sum of money. When we consider a certain sum of money, the money or the amount can even come in paisa. It may not come in rupees all the time, so that's why the amount may come in decimal numbers, so we represent it as float. The same thing happens for rate of interest. Say for rate of interest as 2.5, 3.5%, we have to declare it as float data type. Time. Now time may not be always 1 year, 2 year or 3 years. Sometimes it can be 1 year 6 months or 1 year 5 months. In that case, for time with time that is 1 year 5 months, we have to represent it as 1.5 years. So again, for that it has to be of type float because it's a decimal number. Now, and lastly, the variable SI should also be of float data type. This is because if these variables principal, rate of interest and time are float data type, then the resultant expression that will calculate, which is the simple interest, should also be of float data type. This is because simple interest is calculated on the basis of principal, rate of interest and time. Now come to the next line. Here you have a try block. Inside this try block you have a piece of Java statements, a set of Java statements, and then you have the catch block. Inside this catch block you just have one Java statement. Now let's come to know what is the purpose of this try block. Why do we put a set of statements inside this try block? This is because whenever we put a set of Java statements inside this try block, all these statements will be analyzed line by line by the compiler, and it will check and detect any errors if encountered beforehand. And say at any particular line an error occurs, so from that line it will jump to the catch block and it will show out the error in that particular line. Say for example, when the compiler executes the try block, and let us consider there is no error in the first line, that is principal equal to float.parseFloat jtextfield1.getText. Let's say there is no error occurring in the first line. There is no error occurring in the second line. But if there occurs any error in the third line, that is with the statement time equal to float.parseFloat jtextfield3.getText, then the Java code will stop immediately at this point. That means from here it won't proceed to the next line. It will stop immediately here, and from here the control will come here and it will jump to the catch block, and it will execute this catch block and then come inside the catch block and it will execute the statement inside this catch block. Now what is this statement inside this catch block says? It displays a message dialog, or we can also say that it displays a dialog box or a message box which will identify the error that was encountered in the try block, that is in this line, and it will show that particular error to the user using this show message dialog method. So this is the class JOptionPane, and this is the method JMessageDialog, represented as JOptionPane.showMessageDialog. Then within bracket you have two parameters, null comma x.toString. Here x is the variable of type exception. Now keep in mind that exception means an error. So whatever error is encountered in the try block in a particular line, that error will be shown to the user, and it will be first converted into a string type before it is displayed to the user. Now just coming back to the try block again. Now just considering that there is no error in this set of Java statements, so let's understand line by line what each Java statement represent. In the first line, the value that is supplied in the first text field, that is jtextfield1, will be extracted using this getText method. So any value that is supplied in the text field will be of string type. So when you try to extract a value which is of string type, you use this getText method. And since the value you supplied was a numeric value, a number which represents the principal, so it has to get converted into the float data type for further processing. That means if you need to calculate this simple interest SI, you have to find the product of principal and rate of interest and time, and for that all these variables, principal, rate of interest and time, has to be of float data type or any other numeric data type. It cannot be of a string data type. If it's of string data type, just grab the text from this text field as shown here with this line jtext field1 dot get text, and after extracting the value convert it to float so that it can be stored in this variable called principal. Then the same thing happens for this variable rate of interest. Rate of interest is the second text field, which is jtext field2. The value that you supply for rate of interest will be stored in jtext field2, and then it will be extracted using the getText method, and after extraction it will then be converted into a decimal type, that is using this method float.parseFloat. And once it is converted into a decimal type or a float type, the final value will be stored in rate of interest. Then again in the next line for time, which is the jtext field 3, the value that we supply in for time in jtext field 3 will be first extracted using this getText method, and then it will be converted into float data type so that it will be shown in decimal. So and then the final value will be stored in time. That means, say if the value that we supplied for principal in jtext field 1 is 1000, after converting it to float it becomes 1000.0, and then it gets stored in principal. Same for rate of interest. If the value that we supply for rate of interest in jtext field 2 is 5, then after converting it into float it becomes 5.0, and then it gets stored in this variable called rate of interest. And again for time, the value that you supplied for time, say if it is 2 years, so first extract this value that is 2 and then convert it into float type so that it becomes 2.0, and then store it in the variable called time. Now after you find out all these values for principal, rate of interest and time, calculate the SI or the simple interest for these values of principal, rate of interest and time using this expression principal into rate of interest into time divided by 100. In this case, as the value of principal was 1000, rate of interest was 5 and time was 2, so multiply 1000 into 5 into 2 divided by 100, and whatever value you get, you store it in the variable called SI. So the variable called SI will also be in will also be a decimal number. Now once you get the value for simple interest in the variable called SI, then after that from this variable called SI you have to put it in this text field, that is jtext field 4. So how will you do that? See, in order to put a value in the text field, as you already know that text fields accept only string values, so in order to put the value from SI into this jtext field 4, it has to be first converted into string, and for that to happen use this expression float.toString. That means from float we are converting it to string, this SI. So this SI variable, which was initially of float data type, a float data type, will be converted into string using this statement float.toString, and within bracket you put SI. Then you can easily put it in this text field, that is jtext field 4, using this method jtext field 4.setText. Okay, so after doing that, the result gets displayed in the fourth text field, that is jtext field 4. So in this way, whatever amount we supply it for principal or for the rate of interest or for the time, with the help of a proper expression, the simple interest will be calculated basing on this, that is principal into rate of interest into time divided by 100, and the result will be stored in SI, and SI, since it was in float format, it will be converted into the string format to get displayed in the fourth text field. And all these things happens only on clicking this button called calculate button. So clicking this calculate button is a type of an event. So on the occurrence of this event, this piece of code gets executed which calculates the simple interest.